Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, the opening lecture of School Snippets in English. My name is Thamar Gindin. I am the Israel's first cultural attaché in free Iran. And until Iran is free, I build bridges between the Iranian and the Israeli nations and open eyes on both sides to let people see that we're really the same. And even if we have our differences, they're cool. I'm a Persian linguist, an Iranian linguist. It means that I read Ahasuerus original, and I also read Khamenei E original and all the uh, Persian and Iranian leaders in between. I want to Today I'm here to talk about the Book of Esther, which is my obsession. Iran is my obsession, my life mission, and also my profession. I'm an Iranian linguist. I have a PhD in Iranian linguistics, and reading sources makes you learn things. So let's start talking about the historical aspects of the Book of Esther. We only have about 45 minutes. Just a quick reminder of the story, the timeline of the Book of Esther, because the historical aspects of the Book of Esther can be a lecture for 4 hours. I chose to concentrate today on the timeline. I just want to say that if you have questions, you're very welcome to write them in the chat. And when we finish, I'll finish before our 45 minutes are over. I'll see the questions in the chat, and we'll ask the other hosts to unmute you so you can ask them. I hope I can answer all of them. If not, we can continue on whatever social media we can meet. So the timeline of the Book of Esther, and also a quick reminder of the story. The Book of Esther starts on year 3 of Ahasuerus with a big feast, at the end of which Queen Vashti is expelled. If we have time at the end, which I doubt, but you can also ask, there's a reason that she refused to come to the men's feast. And it's not because she was asked to appear naked, because she was not. That's year 3 of Ahasuerus, according to chapter 1 of the Book of Esther. On chapter 2, we have a few events. It starts with gathering virgins for the king. The year is not stated, but we know that the virgins who were gathered for the king were marinated for a whole year in perfumes and oils. So it took at least 1 year until they started coming to the king, and Esther was not the first one because he loved her out of all the virgins. So we know that it probably took a few years. Esther is chosen on year 7 of Ahasuerus. He chooses her on Tevet. Because the months in the Book of Esther are the Hebrew months, and this lecture is in English. For those of you who are not familiar with Hebrew months, I also wrote the English equivalent. So Tevet is around December, January. Esther is chosen, and there's a big feast. Then at the end of chapter 2, we have a second virgin gathering, and Bigtan and Teresh, 2 of the king's servant, plot to assassinate the king. He's not assassinated yet. It will be only 9 years after the Book of Esther ends that the same king will be assassinated by 2 servants. Year 12 of Ahasuerus is the main events take place on year 12, which is described in chapters 3 to 9 of the Book of Esther. And the main events are in Nisan, Haman casts the lot and chooses the date to kill all the Jews. And the king gives his decree to kill all the Jews and embezzle all their property. Then in Sivan, which is around June, the king gives a counter decree as Esther makes 2 feasts, invites Ahasuerus and Haman. We're not going to go through that. It's not exactly historical. We'll get to the question of is the Book of Esther historical at the end, but this is the story. And at the end, she tells Ahasuerus she's Jewish and Haman wants to kill all the Jews, and Haman is executed. And then she cries until the king gives a counter decree that allows the Jews to fight for their lives and kill their enemies. And in Adar, which is about equivalent to March, there's a great massacre. The Jews kill 75,810 people. And then they have a big feast. We already know that Jewish holidays are always about, they try to kill us, we won, let's eat. So that's the story. I hope we have time to talk about more holidays that are like this because it's not the only holiday with this story. This is the timeline of the Book of Esther. I will start by saying that it's not considered historical because there are no other sources of the same events. The Book of Esther itself, we can know by its language and by some other things. It was written more than 200 years after the events it describes, but there are no contemporary sources, no sources from that time. And the Greek historians who didn't miss any chance to badmouth the Persians don't say anything about the king allowing to kill a whole minority and about the king allowing that minority to kill so many people in his empire. And you should take into consideration that the world then was much smaller. The world population was much smaller than it is now. We would expect such a thing. So it's not considered historical, but I say it's not considered historical because, for example, the Cyrus Declaration, Cyrus, we'll see later, was Ahasuerus's grandfather. Cyrus Declaration was only documented in the Bible until the 19th century when it was found, when a very similar version of it was found in excavations in Iraq. So it's not considered historical. And we'll be back with this timeline. Now let's go to some anchors in reality. Our first anchor in reality is Shushan. Shushan is the capital, the city where everything takes place. The Hebrew name is Shushan, Old Persian Susha, and Greek Susa. It's a real city. Present-day Shush in Khuzestan province in Iran. And it was the winter capital. Khuzestan province in Iran breaks heat records every year. It's a very, very hot place. The king doesn't want to be there in the summer. So it's the winter capital. And Hamadan, which is considered by Persian Jews to be Shushan, was a capital of the same kings in the same dynasty. It's just not Shushan. It was called Hangmatana back then. It's called Ekbatana in Latin, and it's documented in the Bible as Achmeta, once in the Book of Ezra. This is also where Esther and Mordecai are buried. So Susa or Shush is our anchor in reality. This is a Google Maps screenshot of present-day Shush. You can see that the capital, that the city is all around this area, which has some archaeological excavations and some nothing. I asked people who live there in Shush or in Khuzestan, what's there? We'll see a little model in a few minutes, but what I want to show you is that, can you see my cursor? Okay, this whole area, this big area, is an area with nothing. It's not excavated, but it's also forbidden to build there or to enter. So this was probably the city of Shushan. The book mentions the citadel of Shushan, Shushan Habira, and the city of Shushan. So this was probably the city. And this sort of rhombus was Shushan the capital or the citadel. You can see here the Apadana castle of Shush. Apadana is the festival hall where most feasts took place. And you can also see that there's Apadana gas station. And there are also Apadana matches. Apadana is like a, a brand name in present day Shush. I see there are people in the waiting room. You might want to let them in. And this is the model I promised you. It's a model of the city of Shush. You can see here the citadel. This is the palace where everything took place. This hall, it was a big column hall, was most probably where all the feasts took place. And the other citadel is new. They just stole stones from the old citadel to build it many centuries later. And just one interesting thing, which has nothing to do with the Book of Esther, is the most prominent thing in this whole model of the city of Shush, I think, is this weird dome. It's called a pineapple dome. This is the tomb of Daniel the prophet, which is also our Daniel. So when there's peace and we go to Iran, we can visit the tomb of Daniel the prophet. So Shushan was a real capital. It was a real capital city. It had a bira, a citadel, and a city, and it is found in present-day Iran. The anchor 1.5 is the empire. I'm saying 1.5 because it says that it was from India to Ethiopia, 127 countries or satrapies. While in actuality, this is a map by Ian Mladyov from Michigan University. And you can see that it is from the southern borders are from India to Ethiopia. But you can also see that it's not 127 provinces or countries or satrapies. We can always say that 127 is a different administrative unit, or we can just say that 127, like many other numbers that are a power of 2 minus 1, is a typological number. We will have a lot of typological numbers in the Book of Esther. So the empire, the extent of the empire from India to Ethiopia is an anchor in reality. 127 provinces, not so much. And the major anchor in reality is King Ahasuerus. I'm using the Jewish name of the king, the name in the Jewish Bible, but in Hebrew it's Achashverosh. Ahasuerus is the English translation. In Old Persian, he was called Shayarsha, and in Greek, his name is Xerxes, pronounced in English Xerxes. The Septuagint, which is the first Bible translation into a foreign language, it's a translation to Greek, tells the same story about King Artaxerxes, but the Book of Ezra, for example, mentions both Artaxerxes and Xerxes, and Artaxerxes is called Artaxasta. In fact, the Book of Ezra is one of the more accurate historical sources, and he does mention the Achaemenid king. Achaemenid is the name of the dynasty. He mentions the Achaemenid king by their real historical order: Cyrus, Darius, Ahasuerus, Artaxasta, and then it was probably Darius II who found Cyrus's decree and allowed the real building of the temple. So we have this king. I usually show how we got from this name to that name, but I'm not sure we have enough time. If we do, I'll show at the end. So Hebrew Achashverosh is for Persian Shayarsha because classical Hebrew can't say names that start that start with sh. So we added a prothetic aleph. And the Greeks also couldn't pronounce the name, so they called him Xerxes. There were two kings by this name, but the second one only reigned for 45 days. So he couldn't have been the Xerxes or the Ahasuerus of the Book of Esther, because as we saw, it only starts in year 3. So let us proceed. You might have seen Xerxes in the movie 300. He's a tall, black, bald man, which is not how he looked in reality. In reality, which means in the inscriptions and in the stone engravings that depict him, he has a beard, he has curls, and most probably because Iranians at that time were not mixed yet with Semitic people. They were Aryan. The name Iran, or in Old Persian, Aryanam, means of the Aryans. The Iranians and Indians call themselves Aryan centuries and millennia before the Germans adopted the same identity from the Indians. So he was he probably had fair skin and light hair and eyes. This is probably how he looked. Ahasuerus was the son of Darius the Great, and Hutausa, called Atossa in Greek, who was the daughter of Cyrus the Great. Again, I don't think we'll have enough time, but if we do, I will tell you the story of Darius's accession to the throne and how he married Hutausa. It's not a love story. There's no love in that era, but it is an interesting one. So he was son of Darius the Great and Hutausa, daughter of Cyrus the Great. He wasn't the first son of Darius, but he was the first son of Darius after becoming king, and he was the grandson of Cyrus the Great. The timeline we know about Xerxes is from the Babylonians kept record of dates. So most dates we know are from Babylonians. They didn't write beautiful stories like the Greeks, but they did keep very accurate dating. So this is what we know from them. From the Greeks, we know the stories. We always have to take these stories with a grain of salt, just like we have to take biblical stories, because they mostly wanted to badmouth the Persians, and they also relied on stories that they've heard, which might have been half mythical. But this is what we know about Xerxes. We know he ascended to the throne on 486 before the Common Era. We even know that it was in November, maybe early December, when his father died in battle. Years of kings always start or from spring to spring, from Nisan to Adar, because just think of what would happen if we start counting for each king in the real date when they ascended to the throne. Then after a few years, we won't know which year it was. So his first year is from November 486 BCE to March 485 BCE. We will count the years later. So this is his accession. We don't know exactly when, but Herodotus also describes a great feast and a declaration. He describes a great feast where Xerxes declares that he is going to war against Greece. He's gathering the biggest army ever seen. Herodotus says it was 5 million people. They always exaggerate. We don't believe them. But it was a great army, and they probably had to gather from the whole empire and maybe train. So it probably took a few years and cost a lot of money, which we can also keep in mind when we ask a few questions later. So this was a great feast, which is not dated. We just know that there was this declaration and call for battle. We do know that the Greco-Persian Wars, it was actually round two. Round one was in the time of Darius. And it's actually 480 to 480 to 479 before the Common Era. It was Ahasuerus' turn, Xerxes' turn, to fight the Greeks. We know of two major battles. The Battle of Thermopylae, I checked how to say it in Greek. The Battle of Thermopylae has actually three possible dates. I chose August 20th, not because it's the middle one between the three assessments, but I'll show you later why I also like this one. In this battle, this is the battle described in the movie 300. In this battle, the Greeks were few but smarter, and they situated their army behind a very narrow passage that actually eliminated all the number advantage that Xerxes had. So he came with all his 5 million people, but they had to go through this narrow passage, and the Greeks just slaughtered them as they went. And at the end, they found a traitor among the Greeks who just took them on a bypass where they could access the Spartans from behind and kill 300 people. At the end of this battle, it is said that Xerxes had 20,000 killed soldiers buried before he marched his army in between, because he wanted his army, he didn't want to discourage his army, so he buried them before he let the army pass. Let's keep that in mind, because that's a great sin in Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is the religion of Iran before Islam, and we know that Ahasuerus was Zoroastrian because he thanks the Lord Ahura Mazda, who is the head god of the Zoroastrian pantheon. The second battle, the Persians ended up winning the Battle of Thermopylae, but with great losses. The second battle on September 26 or 27 was the Battle of Salamis. In the Battle of Salamis, either the Iranian demons or the Greek gods were on the side of the Greeks, and it was a marine battle, and there was a great storm, and the Greeks won. Ahasuerus was returned to Persia, to Susa, defeated, and then just drank and had fun with his many wives and mistresses until the end. He never tried to go back and conquer Greece. So these are the two battles that I want you to keep in mind. And this is the timeline we have for Xerxes. Now what we want to try to do is try to unite these two timelines and see what we can make of it. So we have the timeline of the Book of Esther. Year 3 of Ahasuerus, big feast. Year 7 of Ahasuerus, and year 12 of Ahasuerus. Year 1, we said, was 486 to 85. Year 2, 485 to 4. Year 3, 484 to 3. We don't have anything documented on this year, but it could be the big feast, because we have the big feast documented both here and there. I just want to say that what we're doing here, we're approaching Purim. Okay, what I'm saying now is not historically accurate, but a way or a suggestion to reconcile these two timelines. It's half imaginary. It just dresses up as history. I don't want to see it in Wikipedia later. Years 4 to 6 of his reign were 383 to 380. Year 7 was 480 to 479. You're muted, but maybe you can write in the chat if you remember what happened in these years, in this year, 480 to 479. Okay. If you wrote that this is the Greco-Persian Wars, you were right. So this is a very eventful year. In the summer, he loses the battle in Greece, and in the winter, in December, he chooses Esther and has a big feast. Then we have years 8 to 11, and year 12 of his reign, where most of the events take place, is 475 to 474. We will talk mostly about year 7 of his reign. So we have the documented or assessed dates. Okay, assessed dates are, for example, as I said, August 20th is one of 3 possible dates given for this battle. You will see in a minute why I chose this one. September 27th, Battle of Salamis. And we have Tevet, Esther chosen. I want to switch to another. Okay. I want to show you an Excel file that that I made with my writing partner, Maya Nishkoli, when we wrote our book. Churban Bayit Rishon was way before. It was even before Cyrus the Great. I want to show you an Excel file that I made with my writing partner, Maya Nishkoli, to calculate the lunar equivalents, the lunar dates of the same events. It's in Hebrew, and we have here events from our book. But what I want you to see here is that we have the years of the kings from Nisan to Nisan. Darius the king, then we have Shayalsha with Ahasuerus, and on column A we have a year to compare Hebrew dates, because we take into consideration that the date repeats more or less every 19 years. I think if you've lived long enough on this planet, you already know that it's not exact. Sometimes it's a day here and a day there. I wrote about it. Sometimes it's 8 or 11 years, but it's more or less the same date. So we looked for the lunar equivalents in 2009, which is the equivalent of this year. And what did we find? We found that August 20th is Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul. I'm reminding you again. Now we're getting into a little bit of spiritual explanations based on beliefs from the 5th century before the Common Era. It was Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul, and September 27th was Erev Yom Kippur. Why is this important? Because the story of Purim and the story of Darius' accession to the throne, and the story of Pesach and many other stories are based on the belief in a New Year's myth, an ancient Near East New Year's myth, that around the New Year, which is either around the spring equinox, autumn equinox, or the longest night of the year, the world is in danger, and especially for about 40 days, and there's always some climax on the 10th or 13th day of the new year. So this is also the time we say slichot, but also according to ancient Near East mythology, this is a dangerous time. And as I said before, burying people in the ground, burying the dead in the ground, is a very, very, very big sin in Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is considered an ecological religion because you're not allowed to bury the dead because they would defile the earth and then make the demons stronger and the gods weaker. You can't burn them because they will defile the fire with the same result. You can't throw them to the river because they will defile the water and weaken the gods and strengthen the demons. So they have to be put in a place called Dachma, or a tower of silence, to be eaten by the bird of heaven. And then after 6 months, when the bones are exposed to the sun, they're no longer contaminating or contaminated, and you can just do with them whatever you want. So on the time when the dangerous time starts, Ahasuerus Xerxes buries 20,000 people in the earth. It weakens the gods and strengthens the demons. I know this is not history, but this is a common belief, and it's I liked making up this explanation. And Esther is chosen on December, and in December, not the new moon, the holiday of Sakaya is actually a holiday that's not, we're not sure where it was. We only know it was around the New Year, so we can. And this is also what my writing partner and I did. We dated it to the longest night of the year, which is the birth of the sun god, and there's a Babylonian holiday, and Ishtar is a Babylonian goddess. That's the name of Esther. So there's also some symbolism in this. So this is the timeline for year 7, and it's mostly symbolical, but nevertheless interesting. And then when Ahasuerus comes back, we know from the Greeks that he gives himself up to drinking and fornication. And maybe this is why virgins were gathered again in chapter 2. Most people don't notice this, but he chooses Esther. Why does he need to gather virgins again? Maybe because this is the only thing he did after his defeat. And this may also be the reason why Bigtan and Teresh were so mad at him. I want to see if there are no questions, I will tell you the story of Darius's accession to the throne, because Jews are not mentioned in Iranian sources until the 3rd century of the Common Era. Okay, Ahasuerus or Xerxes is 5th century before the Common Era, so it would take a few centuries until Jews are mentioned, and they're mentioned in an inscription by a Zoroastrian priest who says, I killed these heretics and those heretics and these infidels and those infidels, and one of these heretics and infidels were Jews. The infidel ethnic groups or religious groups were Jews. This is the first mention of Jews. Jews are not mentioned before that. But there is a very, very similar story to the Book of Esther, only without Jews. So I'm looking at the chat if there are any. Okay. Okay, someone direct things that were written directly to me, I'm not reading. Georgian or Julian, I'm not sure. These are the dates that I found. I assume it's Georgian. Okay, so I'll tell you the story of Darius's accession to the throne. Cyrus the Great had 2 sons. Their name were Cambodia, or in Greek, Cambyses, and Bardia, who's called in Greek Smerdis. We'll call them Cambodia and Bardia like their Persian names. Cambodia, who was the king, went to rule from Egypt because they were also, the Achaemenid kings were also pharaohs. They ruled Egypt. He went there, and he was crazy. crazy, meaning that when he had an argument with his servant, he said, okay, I'll tell you how we'll settle this argument. I'll shoot an arrow at your son. If I miss, you're right. And if I hit him, I'm right. He killed his son. Herodotus also said that he convinced his father to let him marry his sister. This means that Herodotus didn't know anything about Zoroastrianism, because in Zoroastrianism, marrying your sister is one of the most important commandments. And another thing that Herodotus tells us is that when a calf was born, which the Egyptians deemed an incarnation of one of their gods, he wounded that calf in his thigh. Then he had a dream, and in the dream, a messenger comes from Susa and said that your brother is sitting on the throne. Bardia is sitting on the throne and says, I am king. What does a good king do when he hears that his brother sits on the throne, or gets a message that he will sit on the throne? Sends a servant to kill his brother. And then when he's on his way back to Susa, a messenger comes from Susa to where he was in Syria and says that Bardia is sitting on the throne. He calls the servant. The servant said, no, I buried him with my own two hands, which also means that Herodotus doesn't know anything about Zoroastrianism, because he's not allowed to bury him. But he did say, I killed him with my own two hands. And they think, who could he be? And they realize there's a servant who was left to guard the castle, and his brother looks very similar to Bardia. Maybe they noticed that he's missing, and he put his brother on the throne. Now, these servants were Median. Cyrus the Great freed the Persian nation from Median rule. In the Book of Esther, we always have Persia and Media. It's like Tel Aviv, Yafo. Media was the previous empire, and Persia was the present empire, and they were freed from the Medes. So now there are Medes who are assuming the government and sitting on the throne, and that's a great danger to Persian sovereignty. Then when Kambuja, the king, jumps on his horse to get back to Susa as fast as possible, I think I can stop share for a while, and then I'll go back to sharing. When he goes back to, wants to go back to Susa, his sword disconnects from its handle and gets into his thigh in the same place where he wounded the Egyptian god. Okay, there's a question that I'll answer later. And he dies because there was no antibiotics back then. And before he dies, he tells all the nobles of Persia that he killed his brother by mistake, and the person sitting on the throne is a Median imposter. Because we don't have a lot of time, I'll just tell you that they come back, they're not sure. His daughter was married to Kambuja, went with the whole harem to Bardia, and now is either married to Bardia or to the imposter, we don't know. And he asks her to check if this is Bardia, the real Bardia, or an imposter. She has to do it by feeling under his curls to see if he has ears, because Bardia the imposter doesn't have ears. And when this is very dangerous, because if he wakes up and finds out she's feeling for his ears, he will be very mad and he might kill her. But for her nation and for her father, she is willing to do this. And she saves her nation because she finds out that it's really the imposter, and his father and his friends kill him, and everyone is very happy, and they have a holiday celebrating this for at least 100 years later, because Herodotus tells us about it, and he lived much later than Darius the Great. And this whole massacre takes place on the 10th of Bagayadi, which is the equivalent of Tishrei, which is our Yom Kippur. So this is another New Year myth told about the same Book of Esther. The last thing is about year 12, just one little thing. Most events take place in the summer, but Susa is the winter capital, and they take place in Susa. So if we want to say that the Book of Esther is 100% correct, we have to find a reason for the king to stay in the hottest place in Iran during the summer and not take all his camp to Hangmatana. And the reason could be that on the 12th year of his reign, on 475 before the Common Era, Hutausa, daughter of Cyrus, died. And a sick parent is a very good reason to change your travel plans. We're nearing the end. No, this is not what I wanted to share. This is what I wanted to put on the chat. This is for the chat. What I wanted to share was that this lecture is based on two of my books, and you can look at them for further reading. What I wanted to put on the chat is links if you're interested. The Book of Esther Unmasked is a line-by-line commentary, and Queen, which is in translation to English, is the same. Actually, what I told you today was the mental game we did when we wrote the Queen. And oh, I think I wrote it in a direct message. And I want to thank the venue, which is a Sgula Jewish History magazine, and the Galilee Studies Institute, who is giving us this Zoom. Okay, now I'm sending you all the relevant links if you're interested for Sgula things and for my things. And I was very glad to open this lecture series. It was mysticism and speculations dressed up as history. But everything I said about dates, times, anchors, and realities was true. And I would wish you a happy Purim, and may we have happier times than this. Thank you very much. I'm stopping sharing, and I'll answer questions from the chat. Where was the chat? Okay. There was one question on the chat. Does this mean that the Ptolemies were just carrying on the Zoroastrian tradition when conducting incestuous marriages, or was it also a Greek tradition? I'll tell you why I think the Zoroastrians did it, because I've read a lot of Zoroastrian law. As a linguist, the most interesting language is Middle Persian, and it has a lot of laws. And all these there's first of kin marriage. It's not incestuous marriage, because incest means not chaste, and this is the most chaste of marriages, so it's not forbidden. But next of kin marriage was only practiced if the father or the deceased, the husband, had a certain property or more. So it was only for rich people, which means it was intended to leave the property in the family. And this, I assume there were both rich Greeks and Persians and other nations. Very interesting. Thank you. Is Gula going to post the recordings? Yes, Gula is going to post the recordings both in English and in Hebrew. Could I show the slide of the not 127 countries at the time? Oh, okay. You want to see? Um, Let me just go back. You want to see the map of the Achaemenid Empire? I'm showing the map of the Achaemenid Empire. It's a map by Ian Mladyov. It's actually in 490 before the Common Era, 4 years before Xerxes ascended to the throne. This was the empire he inherited from his father, Darius the Great. Any more things in the chat? Is Mordecai a historical figure or ahistorical? Okay, about Mordecai and Esther. There is in there were like clay tablets found in the fortifications of Persepolis, and there was a person named Marduka in the Achaemenid court, but he was like a tax collector, very, very boring. Like the most interesting thing he wrote was this person brought 30 kilos of wheat as tax. Really boring. He was probably not as important as he's made here, and we don't know that he was Jewish. Another thing that some say is an anchor in reality is that Xerxes' wife was called Amestris, which is a little bit like Esther, or if you know more linguistics, it could also be Vashti, or Vashtris, but um, but we know that she was the daughter of Hutana, who was one of Darius's friends. Remember, I told you that one of the nobles had a daughter married to the king. This is Hutana. His big daughter was married to the king when Darius ascended to the throne, and his little daughter, Amestris, was married to Xerxes. So she was not Jewish, and he was not Jewish, and unfortunately. Older generations of Ethiopian Jews had a tradition of a powerful redeeming queen. That's probably the queen of Shva, not Esther. Was the Bet HaMikdash built during our Purim story? According to Ezra, the book of Ezra says that Cyrus let them return and said that they should build a temple. Then he said there was Darius, and at the time of Ahasuerus, according to Ezra, the neighbors of the Israelites who wanted to participate in building the temple, but were forbidden, because the Israelites say, no, no, no. The Judeans said, no, no, we're building temples. You're not participating. And they wrote letters of condemnation to King Ahasuerus about letters of slander to Ahasuerus about the Israelites. So it was only Darius II who found the Tzetale, a little scroll in Achmeta, which is Hagmatana, that says Dichrona, a memory, which is probably the permission that Cyrus gave to the Judeans to build a temple. So it's not during our Purim story. Okay, at the end of Esther, Mordecai is in charge of the treasury. Yes, I know, but there's no mention of it in Persian sources. Not Malkat Shva, this was in addition. She wasn't based enough. Okay, I learned something new, and Nomi Kruger, and I have to check it with Ethiopian friends about the tradition of a powerful redeeming queen. Okay, and thank you for the compliments. So Iranians take our Purim story do Iranians take our Purim story seriously? Do you have 2 more hours? Um, there were about 15, not 15 years ago, 12 years ago or 13 years ago, there were protests in Iran in front of the tomb of Mordecai and Esther in Hamadan, and they burnt a flag that said Holocaust Irani. They take it too seriously. Really, they're crazy. They believe that the story is historical. I can try to find it. I'm looking for Hamadan Holocaust Irani. It's really it's a funny. Funny but sad. Okay, I found it. I'm sharing. Look, the flag says Holocaust 77,000 Irani. We already know that they were not 77,000. They were 75,810, and they were not all Iranians. They were all over the empire. The empire included both Iranians and non-Iranians. On the sign here, it says Ziyaratgah Esther o Mordechai, pilgrimage place of Esther and Mordecai, and they demanded to take the word Ziyaratgah, pilgrimage place, off the sign, and they did. So now only Jews are allowed in this tomb. And after October 7th, there were also protests in front of this tomb, anti-Semitic protests that burned flags of Israel. And Iranian Jews were very, very upset with it and wrote to the Minister of Internal Affairs that this is not right to let people identify Jews with Zionists. And this place is Jewish, not Zionist. Oh, okay. Ethiopia was part of the Persian Empire at the time. Esther could have no Ethiopia. I'll show you the map again. Ethiopia, the biblical Ethiopia, Kush, is is not present day Ethiopia. It's more like present day Sudan. So it's not the same place. You see? What similarities are in the Indian sources, in the Iranian sources that was found? Um, can one see in Yahad coinage some link to Persian culture? Yahad coinage, I don't want to say anything I'm not sure about. And the similarities in the Iranian sources that were found, uh, the Iranian source actually only describes like the story as a whole. We have to finish in 2 minutes. Um, it talks about the story as a whole, but the Greeks tell the larger story, and there's a young woman who has to save her country, her nation. She's married to the king, and she gets instructions from a male adult through a eunuch. Didn't say that, but she gets these instructions through a eunuch, and she risks her life to save her nation. And then there's a great massacre and a holiday. The Purim story refers only to Judeans, not all 12 tribes. Judeans means the tribes of Judea and Benjamin. Mordecai and Esther are from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay. So thank you so much. I I wrote in the chat all the details, and they will also be posted to the group, to the WhatsApp group. And if you want to stay for the Hebrew lecture, you may, but it's more or less the same lecture. So thank you very much. I didn't see everybody, but I had a great time with you. Thank you.